Shopping is hard.
I can never find anything in my size.
I don't even know my size.
I buy my clothes the same place I buy my groceries.
There's a better way. Make it easy with Stitch Fix. Just share your size, style, budget, and done. Your personal stylist sends pieces picked just for you.
That was easy.
Stitch Fix. Online personal styling for everyone. Free shipping and returns. No subscription required. Get started today at stitchfix.com.
Your burger is served, and this is our finest Pepsi Zero Sugar. Its sweet profile perfectly balances the savory notes of your burger.
That is one perfect combination. Burgers deserve Pepsi.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Well, Donald Trump's Middle East breakthrough will create a golden age of peace and prosperity, unless, of course, Republicans and Democrats working together mess it up. For the past several days, President Trump has been greeted with open arms in the Arab world. This is, in my view, the great Trump reset, the end of a neocon domination of our foreign policy, which pursued endless foreign war, where our inherent national interest was never clear, erosion of our civil liberties, and, of course, massive, massive debt. The president was greeted to a hero's welcome in Qatar. He was giving an incredible ovation in Saudi Arabia. The immense amount of goodwill created by these visits cannot be overstated. In Riyadh, Trump gave a historic speech where he denounced neoconservatism, foreign inventionism, nation building, and the failed U.S. military interventionism of the Middle East in the past. Listen to President Trump.
The transformations have been unbelievably remarkable. Before our eyes, a new generation of leaders is transcending the ancient conflicts of tired divisions of the past and forging a future where the Middle East is defined by commerce, not chaos, where it exports technology, not terrorism, and where people of different nations, religions, and creeds are building cities together, not bombing each other out of existence. We don't want that. And it's crucial for the wider world to note this great transformation has not come from Western interventionists or flying people in beautiful planes giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs. No, the gleaming marvels of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi were not created by the so-called nation builders, neocons, or liberal nonprofits like those who spent trillions and trillions of dollars failing to develop Kabul, Baghdad, so many other cities. Instead, the birth of a modern Middle East has been brought by the people of the region themselves, the people that are right here, the people that have lived here all their lives, developing your own sovereign countries, pursuing your own unique visions and charting your own destinies in your own way. It's really incredible what you've done. In the end, the so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built, and the interventionists were intervening in complex societies that they did not even understand themselves. They told you how to do it, but they had no idea how to do it themselves. Peace, prosperity, and progress ultimately came not from a radical rejection of your heritage, but rather from embracing your national traditions and embracing that same heritage that you love so dearly.
That was an incredible rebuke of the Democrats and the neocon Republican establishments which came before Trump. So, of course, it should come as no surprise that the Republicans in the U.S. House and Senate almost immediately snapped into action to attempt to undermine President Trump's diplomatic breakthrough and bring the country closer once again to another war in the Middle East. 177 House Republicans and every Senate Republican except Rand Paul of Kentucky issued a letter to President Trump fear-mongering yet again about Iran's nuclear canard and insisting that they are on the verge of the development of a nuclear bomb. Quote, "We write to express our strong support for your efforts to secure a deal with Iran that dismantles its nuclear program and to reinforce the explicit warnings that you and officials in your administration have issued that the regime must permanently give up any capacity for enrichment," the letter says. "We cannot afford another agreement that enables Iran to play for time. The Iranian regime should know that the administration has full congressional backing to ensure its ability to enrich our uranium is permanently eliminated." Now, the choice that we make will echo through the generations. As my good friend, Colonel Douglas McGregor, said on this very show, The Stone Zone, we're very fortunate that the Iranians are actually willing to negotiate with us again, and perhaps we can reach a solution. There are no guarantees. This will take leadership from the highest levels, starting with President Donald Trump. So let's talk plainly about what awaits America if a war with Iran is pursued. Within hours of the first strike, Iran would seal the Strait of Hormuz, choking the artery through which 1/5 of the world's oil flows. Gas prices will not merely rise, they will erupt like a volcano, burning through family budgets. The economic security Americans built with their own hands since the pandemic disaster could be destroyed. Immediate price increases and the loss of certain goods and services would also result. Yet the cost in treasure, according to Colonel McGregor, stands as nothing compared to the cost in blood, because Iran is not the Iraq of our past wars. You see, Iran consists of 85 million people fortified by mountains. Russia and China have drawn a clear and unambiguous red line for the first time since missiles were placed in Cuba. We face not only the shadow, but the very real substance of nuclear confrontation, not for our country, but for the regional ambitions of a foreign state 7,000 miles from home that goads us towards war. We must face the truth. Our weaker allies often attempt to get us to conduct their wars. Our wars, while we assist allies, American soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines should not and cannot be sacrificed for the territorial expansions that serve no vital strategic interest. I don't believe we should sacrifice American lives on foreign soil while American soil thirsts for our attention. We should not trade America's prosperity for another state's regional hegemony while American prosperity continues to deteriorate. We must not abandon America's democrat principles for imperial ambition. And while those principles are our best hope for justice, we cannot allow them to fade for lack of attention. The true strength of America has never been measured by regimes toppled, but by our lives improved. As Colonel McGregor said, while we secure the borders of other people's states, our communities are crumbling while we send billions abroad. Americans must not choose between medicine or food. This is not America first, this is America last. Imagine instead that we might create a home with trillions that this war will cost. Hospitals in rural areas where mothers drive hours to deliver, high-speed rail connecting our cities like steel arteries, pulsating with the lifeblood of commerce. A more prosperous, safer, more secure America. That's what Donald Trump supports. The clean energy systems harnessing the same sun that warmed Washington and Valley Forge, where every child from Appalachia to the inner city receives an education worthy of our republic. The Constitution placed the power to decide between peace and war in the hands of the American people. They made this decision last November. They voted for peace. They did not vote for war with Iran. We must put America first. Make the phones ring until they cannot ignore the righteous thunder of the people. Call your members of Congress and tell them you oppose unilateral war. You oppose a strike on Iran that will only hurt America. This is a vital fight. Donald Trump is leading the way. Generations of Americans will look back and determine whether we made the right decision or not. In the meantime, it is absolutely clear that John Brennan has freaked out over the fact that the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, fired 2 deep state officials. The Gabbard fired top officials leading the National Intelligence Council because whistleblowers described them as radically opposed to Trump, and has moved that agency right over to her office, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Gabbard, as I reported yesterday, fired Mike Collins, who was serving as the acting chair of the National Intelligence Council, who was deliberately undermining incoming Trump administration policy, as well as his top deputy. But John Brennan, the former CIA director, the chief orchestrator of the Russian collusion hoax, said that he was livid. Let's listen to John Brennan.
This whole thing just makes me livid. It's appalling and outrageous and demonstrates why Tulsi Gabbard never should have been confirmed as Director of National Intelligence. Michael Collins and Marie Langen-Rykoff are two of the most experienced, accomplished, and talented analysts in the entire U.S. intelligence community. With over 60 years of combined experience, they have worked for successive administrations since the 1990s. They have demonstrated time and time again their capabilities, their competence, their integrity, and they have served as role models for a generation of intelligence officers inside of CIA. They're CIA officers by background and by training. And this is going to have real reverberations within the workforce because, as Congressman Hines pointed out, it's clearly a signal to tell analysts throughout the intelligence community, you tell the truth, you provide objective analysis as you're supposed to be doing, you are running the risk of getting fired. And Michael and Maria are really the quintessential analysts that you want to have providing insight and information and analysis to policymakers so they make the right decisions for U.S. policymakers. But this is a very tangible example of such dangerous and insidious corruption within the Trump administration.
What's appalling and courageous is how John Brennan conducted himself at the CIA. Brennan, first of all, shamefully set up 24 Trump advisors without any probable cause for surveillance by the U.S. intelligence apparatus. I was one of those 24 people. He also colluded with foreign intelligence to conduct illicit, politically motivated spying operations in violation of the U.S. Constitution. It was Brennan who was instrumental in the illegal FISA warrants and wiretaps were deployed in the lead-up to the 2016 presidential election while targeting Trump's most vocal supporters, myself included. A U.S. court found in 2023 that the misuse of the FISA courts extended far beyond the mere targeting of Trump actors, citing the FBI found the mechanism had been used to improperly spy over 300,000 times on American citizens without proper warrants. This confirms the worst fears of civil libertarians. The Durham report proved demonstrable evidence that was Brennan who first cooked up the Russian collusion hoax with President Barack Obama, Vice President Joe Biden. He knew that the Steele dossier was a fraud. He knew that it had been discredited, but he used it nonetheless as the rationale for an illegal, illicit, and unconstitutional plot to frame Donald Trump as a puppet of the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Brennan used this foreign disinformation to set up Russiagate and that frame job against the president. This is the same John Brennan who funneled arms and money into the hands of the ISIS militants as they wreaked havoc across the Middle East and Europe. Brennan is an admitted communist who said publicly that he voted for the Communist Party candidate in the 1990s. It was Brennan who approved the visas of 4 of the 11 hijackers who attacked America on 9/11 when he was the station chief in Riyadh. And then there's the question of his own conversion to radical Wahhabism when he was the CIA station chief, as attested to by John Guandolo, the counterterrorism CIA agent. Brennan was aware the Steele dossier was a fraud. He's engaged in what I think is traitorous activity. His claim that the Russians hacked the Democrat national computer servers is yet another lie for which he has no proof. John Brennan is outraged? No, I'm outraged that he's outraged. Tulsi Gabbard is firing people who are disloyal to the president. You're listening to The Stone Zone. I'm getting pretty excited. We'll be right back.
This is The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. You're back in the Stone Zone. In the next segment, we're going to be taking your questions. Please go to Ask Stone at stonezone.com. That's Ask Stone at stonezone.com. We will take as many of your questions as we can. They can relate to the news, politics, history, food, culture, style, fashion, movies, you name it. But I'm here to take your questions. That's Ask Stone at stonezone.com. We're talking about former CIA Director John Brennan. He has now finally had his national security clearance lifted. Brennan was involved in the electoral interference and the censorship programs that helped screw Donald Trump out of his rightful reelection in 2020. In fact, he was one of the 51 former intelligence officials who penned a letter proclaiming the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop as Russian disinformation and propaganda, which we now know to be completely and totally false. And then it was Brennan and his cohorts who strong-armed the social media companies to keep this legitimate story regarding Hunter Biden's laptop from the American people. Polls actually showed that 17% of voters would not have voted for Joe Biden had they known that the laptop was real. Everything I know about Hunter Biden's laptop, I read in the New York Post, who accurately called this entire scandal spies who lie. So rather than attacking Tulsi Gabbard, perhaps the Justice Department could be looking at the illegal activities of John Brennan and others, because someone should be held accountable for the improper actions and politicization of intelligence. It takes time to weed them out and fire them. Tulsi Gabbard, precisely the right woman for this job. She's doing the right thing. All right, I want to remind you, we're going to be taking your questions in the next segment. Go to Ask Stone at stonezone.com. Ask Stone at stonezone.com. We're going to jam in as many of your questions today as we possibly can. Also going to touch on the fact that President Trump has come out against the birthright citizenship, which he is challenging in the Supreme Court. Talk about that on the other side as well. So once again, if you have a question, go to Ask Stone at stonezone.com. We're going to take as many of your questions as we possibly can. We appreciate your tuning in to the show every single day, where we talk news, politics, sports, history, style, food part. I really like that. Right here in the zone. Don't go away. We'll be right back with more of the Stone Zone.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. We're back in the Stone Zone, and we're going to be taking your questions. Go to Ask Stone at stonezone.com. That's Ask Stone at stonezone.com. We're going to give you a few minutes to get your questions in. In the meantime, the Supreme Court met today to hear arguments on the White House's emergency request to stop nationwide injunction that has been put in place against birthright citizenship and Donald Trump's executive order ending same. Hours after taking office, President Trump had signed an executive order ending birthright citizenship. That is, giving children born in the U.S. the immediate right to citizenship, even when their parents are not U.S. citizens. This order was intended to stop women from entering the United States illegally and giving birth to what are called anchor babies, whose citizenship is then used for their own benefit. It was immediately challenged, of course, by left-wing organizations and now has found its way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which currently is hearing arguments from both sides. President Trump asked the Supreme Court to stay this nationwide injunction issued by the federal judges. Trump released a statement on Truth Social this morning, slamming the abuses of the loophole in this law, specifically regarding anchor babies. Big case today in the United States Supreme Court, said Trump. Birthright citizenship was not meant for people taking vacations to become permanent citizens of the United States and bringing their families with them, all the time laughing at the suckers that we have been. The United States is the only country in the world that does this, and for that reason, which nobody knows. But the drug cartels love it. We are, for the sake of being politically correct, a stupid country if we continue to do this. But in actuality, this is the exact opposite of being politically correct. And yet another point that leads to the dysfunction of America. Birthright citizenship is about the babies of slaves. As conclusive proof, the Civil War ended in 1865. The bill went to Congress less than a year later in 1866 and was passed shortly after that. It had nothing to do with illegal immigration for people wanting to scam our country from all parts of the world, which, of course, they have done. It had to do with the Civil War results and the babies of slaves who our politicians felt correctly needed protection. Please, would somebody explain this to the Supreme Court of the United States? A very strong and forthright Donald Trump. All right, we're going to go to your questions. Our first question comes from Stal in Staten Island. He says, Roger, what do you think of this new requirement for real ID? You know, I think this is the worst idea I've ever heard. I'm planning on heading to New York this weekend for the Italian-American Civil Rights League gathering out in Queens. And I would just learn that when I go to the airport, I'll be required to have one of these new real IDs. You can only get one by providing specific records and documents for the federal government. Your ID will be labeled with a black or gold star. Now, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has promised that, at least initially, people without the real ID will only have to face some extra scrutiny at security checkpoints at the airport, but eventually everyone will be required to have one. The reason they give us for this is that the real IDs will be used to prevent those who are not legally eligible to vote from voting, or those who are not legally eligible to receive Social Security benefits because they are not U.S. citizens from receiving such benefits. Sounds good, but what it really does is give the government a biometric record of every single person in America. This is something conservatives and libertarians have opposed for decades, but this law, the Real ID Act, that was actually passed 20 years ago in 2005. It was one of the many measures rolled out in the wake of the 9/11 attacks. It was presented to the public as being necessary to ensure that similar attacks would never happen again. But the truth is, when you go back and look at it, none of the 11 hijackers who attacked America used fake ID in their efforts to get on the planes, their successful efforts to get on the planes. So I think in this case, Alex Jones, my good friend, is absolutely right. The real goal here is to create a biometric record of every American. And to me, that is dangerous. I'm opposed to these real IDs because I think the possibility for abuse is obvious. Thank you for your question. Beth from Columbus said, yesterday you spoke about repealing the Patriot Act. Do you really think that's a good idea? I must tell you, I do think it is a good idea. It's yet another example of precisely what we are talking about. We were told that the Patriot Act, which allows the government to surveil American citizens essentially without a warrant, with no probable cause, and to hold American citizens in permanent secret detention, was going to be a temporary measure to fight Islamic terrorism. But the Patriot Act has been reapproved every 4 years for the Congress with very, very minor revisions. It is kind of obvious to me that it has been abused, but the crown jewel of that abuse was the fact that the FISA courts were used to spy on President Donald Trump. It is a perfect example of the abuse. The due process has been eviscerated. Civil liberties became a thing of the past. And we watched as the supposedly pro-freedom Republican Party has promoted the Patriot Act. When Trump ran for president in 2016, the true agenda behind these measures, such as the Patriot Act, came to light. secret FISA courts authorized the illegal surveillance and spying on Trump's campaign in order to frame Trump as a Russian agent. We talked about John Brennan's role in that just a few minutes ago. It is interesting to me that Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna of Florida has proposed legislation to repeal the Patriot Act, and it is legislation I strongly support. Thank you for your question. Here is a question from Eric in Weehawken, New Jersey. He says, people say there's a lot you can learn about politics from pro wrestling. Have you ever watched pro wrestling? Do you have a favorite wrestler? And have you gleaned anything from pro wrestling? Well, you're absolutely right. American politics is a lot like pro wrestling. My favorite wrestler, by the way, is Randy Orton. Now, my good friend Sal, he's a Roman Reigns fan, but I disagree. Randy Orton has he's tied for the third most world championship reigns in history, a wrestling career spanning over 20 years. He performs under the SmackDown brand. Orton is widely regarded as one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. Yes, I am a Randy Orton fan. And there's a lot that is comparable when it comes to politics and professional wrestling. There's a lot of head fakes, there's a lot of posturing, but above all, there's entertainment. You see, as Richard Nixon once told me, the only thing in politics worse than being wrong is being boring. This, of course, is the great strength of President Donald Trump. He is never boring. The thing about Trump, who I've now known for 50 years, hates it when I say that, says it makes both of us sound old, is that he is not scripted. He is not reading talking points written by someone else. He is not managed. He's not handled. What you see is what you get. He's genuine. He's authentic. That's why I think he won to begin with. Thank you so much for your question. You can count me as a Randy Orton fan here. Another question, by the way, you can send us your questions by going to Ask Stone at stonezone.com. That's Ask Stone at stonezone.com. We'll get in as many of your questions today as we possibly can. Here is a question, which is, let's see, from Terry in Fairfield, Connecticut. Terry says, I just read a story that said that New Hampshire dominates the pizza scene in America. Not New York, not New Jersey, not Connecticut. Well, I saw that study. It's not a study regarding pizza quality. It is a study that has to do with pizza density, meaning how many pizzas there are per sales per capita based on the population and what the average cost of pizza is. To me, Connecticut will always be the pizza mecca. There's a New Haven style of pizza. You find it at Frank Pepe's, you find it at Sally's, you find it at The Spot. You're now finding it moving into South Florida, I might add. So don't get confused here. The study you mentions the fact that there were a certain number of pizzas per 100,000 residents. It was based on a survey of Google searches. The state of New Hampshire has 1,022 pizzerias, which equates to 72.73 pizzerias per 100,000 residents. Interesting, but that does not speak to the quality of the pizza. Add now the high pizza enthusiasm, because there were 22,512 pizza-related searches per 100,000 residents, and the average cost of pizza was the lowest in the country at $15.74. So you've got a state where people love pizza, but it will never be the kind of pizza you get in New York, New Jersey, or Connecticut. Under Mayor Eric Adams, of course, they're trying to outlaw coal-fired ovens in New York City. This would do away with some of the great pizza meccas. It would be outrageous. It would be typical of the overreach. But I'll stick with New York style, or perhaps my real favorite, New Haven style, and I'll pass on the New Hampshire pizza if you don't mind. Here's a question from Keith in Sandusky, Ohio. Keith says, I see Steve Bannon saying yet again that Donald Trump will run for a third term. In fact, he expects him to be sworn in at the end of this term. What say you? I can only assume that Steve is trolling, doing this for clicks, because he knows as well as I do that the U.S. Constitution specifically prohibits any person from serving more than 2 4-year terms as president. Now, they don't have to be contiguous terms, as we've seen in the case of President Grover Cleveland, a conservative Democrat, New Yorker, a former sheriff, by the way, of Erie County, that's Buffalo, a former governor of New York, and, of course, Donald Trump, whose 2 terms are not contiguous. A meeting with Meet the Press about a week ago, President Trump finally gave up this particular troll and said no, he had no intention of running for another term in 2028. The idea put forward by some that the party would nominate Vice President J.D. Vance. Vance would then choose Trump as his running mate. The ticket would win. Vance would then resign as president. Trump would move up to the presidency. He would then appoint J.D. Vance as another 4-year term as vice president, which, of course, would be subject to the confirmation by the U.S. Senate. That's a fairy tale that is highly unlikely to happen. I will be happy, as President Trump said, with 4 great years. 4 great years. I think we're about to have them. So I did note that the president said that he will not just automatically hand the baton to Vice President J.D. Vance, although he had high praise for Vance. He also praised Secretary Marco Rubio as a potential candidate. I put former Congresswoman, currently the head of the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, in that group as well. But the president said we could have as many as 16 candidates. So I think you should look for a spirited competition for the Republican nomination for president at the end of the golden age years of Donald Trump. He's forging new alliances for peace in the Middle East. He got a $1 trillion deal from the Saudis. He got a $1.4 trillion deal with UAE. Those are investments in the United States. He got a $200 billion deal to buy airplanes from Qatar. Donald Trump means business. He's committed to peace, prosperity, security, and, lastly of all, justice. So I'm still optimistic that we're entering a golden age, but like the president, I'll be happy with 4 great years. Don't go away. We'll be right back to take more of your questions here in the Stone Zone.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone. The Stone Zone. The Stone Zone. Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. You're back in the Stone Zone. We're taking your questions. You can go very quickly to Ask Stone at stonezone.com. Ask Stone at stonezone.com. We're still going to squeeze in as many of your questions as we possibly can. Here is a question for Eric in Boca Raton. Eric says, you've explained many times that you're not a Bush Republican. Why then did you save George W. Bush from having his election stolen by Al Gore and the Democrats in 2000 with your infamous Brooks Brothers riot? Well, there's a lot of disinformation here, so let's dispel it. First of all, I had handled the recount for Governor Tom Kean of New Jersey, who, by the way, celebrated his 90th birthday, I believe, 2 days ago, a campaign where he won by 1,209 votes out of 2 million cast. I was his chief strategic consultant. Because of that, Jim Baker, who had been the White House chief of staff, recalled my expertise in recounts and asked me to go to Florida. There were more cooks than necessary, more chiefs than Indians in Palm Beach, and I was sent to Miami. Now, in Miami, Democrat election officials were attempting to recount the same sheaf of ballots that they had recounted 3 times. At the point that the 2 Democrat commissioners attempted to remove these ballots into a closed-door room with no observers, no windows, no lawyers, no one from the media. That was a violation of the state's sunshine law. So, yes, I directed the Republicans who were observers not to let the door be closed and not to allow them to remove those ballots. Therefore, the claim that we used intimidation tactics to close down the recount are categorically false. But I'm glad to have the opportunity to answer your question. Here is another question. This is from Ellen. Ellen is in Des Moines, Iowa. Ellen says, have you seen the movie The Apprentice about Donald Trump, and what did you think about it? Well, I have seen the movie. First of all, the actor who plays me, well, first of all, I'm way better looking. I'm way better dressed. And the story is a bastardization of the truth. The actor who plays Roy Cohn does a masterful job, I must say. He captured the legendary attorney fixer's mannerisms, his idiosyncratic speech patterns, his gesticulation. It is really uncanny. I think he deserved an Academy Award that he did not get. But the backstory that Roy Cohn threatened to expose sexual misconduct by the head of the Tax Abatement Board in New York City in order to get the approval of the Trump's redevelopment of the Commodore Hotel on 42nd Street is a vile lie. It is a falsehood. New York was dying in those days, and they needed the development. Donald Trump was one of the few frontier entrepreneurs willing to invest in New York City, and it is how you got what would ultimately be the Hyatt Hotel. A great movie, but not historically accurate. Worth seeing, if for no other reason, just for the portrayal of the legendary lawyer Roy Cohn. But the historical facts, unfortunately, are untrue. Afraid we're out of time for today. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Stone Zone. I particularly want to thank those who sent their questions. Again, we're going to save your questions at AskStone@stonezone.com for the next time. Until tomorrow, then, God bless you and Godspeed, and, well, God bless America.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?